This week, the debate over education reform in New York. More rigorous academic standards and new tests that go with them have angered parents, educators, and students who say the changes are happening too quickly.
In the 2 short months of this school year, I've already taken a total of 45 tests and quizzes.
It's wrong, and we have to stand up and say enough is enough.
I see my own children taking test after test to the point of absurdity.
This week, New York State Education Commissioner John King joins us in a live studio audience for a town hall meeting on the new Common Core learning standards on this special hour-long edition of Mountain Lake Journal.
Mountain Lake Journal on Mountain Lake PBS is made possible in part by CVPH Medical Center and the Champlain Valley Heart Center at CVPH, bringing cardiac care closer to home for all North Country residents.
NBT Bank, offering personal banking, financial planning, commercial and business banking. NBTbank.com. Member FDIC.
Stafford, Pillar, Murnane, Plimpton, Kelleher, and Trombley, a full-service law firm in New York State, built on a solid reputation with commitment for assisting clients throughout the region achieve their goals through client-focused legal services.
Northern Insuring, with offices in Plattsburgh, Whitehall, and Messina. The North Country's buttoned-up choice for insurance and employee benefits services.
This is a special edition of Mountain Lake Journal. Here are your hosts, Alice Recor and Tom Halleck.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tom Halleck, along with Alice Recor, President and CEO of Mountain Lake PBS. Welcome to this special edition of Mountain Lake Journal. We are pleased to be joined tonight by New York State's top 2 educators, State Education Commissioner John King and Board of Regents Chancellor Merryl Tisch, who are part of a panel that will take questions and comments from our studio audience. For the next hour, we'll be discussing in depth the new Common Core learning standards that are stirring a lot of debate and division among many parents and educators. We'll introduce our panel in just a moment and tell you how you can join the conversation. But first, it is my pleasure to welcome our President and CEO of Mountain Lake PBS, Alice Recor. Alice.
Thanks, Tom. I really would like to thank all of you in our studio audience and all of those tuning in at home. I'd especially like to thank our panelists for being here tonight as well. As a public media station, it's our role to be the convener of many voices that are working to strengthen our community, and education is the core of the mission here at Mountain Lake PBS. It's essential to our future, and we're very proud here at Mountain Lake to be part of this discussion. Tom?
Thank you very much, Alice. There is no doubt the rollout of the new Common Core standards, which has led to an increase in testing of students, has been incredibly difficult and frustrating for many parents, students, and teachers. In recent weeks, thousands have been attending forums across the state to speak out. Here with more on that is Mountain Lake PBS's Tamika Weatherspoon.
Nobody could explain why.
Parents, teachers, lawmakers, students, everyone is feeling the pressure.
Public education is right now under attack.
Common Core dialogues around New York State are becoming as much a resource about the new public education standards as a source for public outcry.
The ones who are suffering the most are kids, because they're trying to bring an education reform that apparently has not been very well organized and is tied to an outrageous amount of testing.
A packed audience at SUNY this past Thursday rallied against another increase in statewide standardized testing, a key source of measurement in the soon-to-be fully implemented Common Core, though the curriculum itself comes from generally welcomed ideas.
I think the concept of it nobody can disagree with. A child in New York State and a child in Iowa or Alabama or Michigan or New Mexico should all be receiving the same standard of education.
Conversations like this gather significant support for the idea of a common curriculum, but parents and teachers wonder if the pressure to perform is doing more harm than good.
In the 2 short months of this school year, I've already taken a total of 45 tests and quizzes. The information we're being taught has no meaning to us.
I feel it's adding a huge amount of stress.
And not just pressure for the average student. The Common Core measures student and teacher success, teachers by evaluating their effectiveness, and children by performance. That also includes students in special education.
I've seen it in the hallways of the school where they're in tears sitting inside of these rooms taking these tests. They can't do it and they know it. It's really just sort of throwing it in their face. We know you can't do this, but we're going to make you sit through it and prove it to us.
It was abuse to make him sit and take those tests when everybody knew he couldn't do it. And I couldn't opt him out. And I would say to my son, refuse to do it. Put your name on the paper and refuse. And you know what he would say? I can't do that, Mom. Because he wouldn't want to disappoint his teachers.
Now, the pressure is mounting on the state education department to reassure the public. Even after receiving a request to delay Common Core, they're traveling the state in a series of talks, standing to face their own public exam.
Say enough is enough.
For Mountain Lake Journal, I'm Tamika Weatherspoon.
And after fielding complaints from parents and educators, the state education department scheduled a series of public forums, about a dozen in all, at schools and PBS stations like this one across New York, a sort of listening tour for Education Commissioner John King and Regent Chancellor Merryl Tisch. And we welcome them both here tonight. We want to say it's nice to have you here, and we wonder if maybe you would like to start with a few words, Commissioner.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. Very appreciative of the opportunity to have this conversation. Thank you to the studio audience for joining us, and certainly to Mountain Lake PBS for hosting us. I guess where I would start is to remind us of where the state began. The Board of Regents adopted the Common Core standards in 2010, joining with 44 other states, the District of Columbia, and the Department of Defense schools in adopting these standards because they're mapped back from college and career success. They were created by asking, what's the knowledge, what are the skills that students need to succeed in college and careers, and then what are the implications for what students need to know and be able to do at 10th grade, at 7th grade, all the way back to kindergarten. And so we are 3 years into what will be a 7-year phase-in of the Common Core as we move through the grades. And it's certainly challenging. Anytime you try to raise standards across the entire country, it's going to have challenges along the way. That said, I'm actually quite optimistic about what I see in classrooms around the state. I've been in 40 or more schools since the start of the school year, and what I see in classrooms around the state are teachers and students working hard to raise expectations. Students who are reading challenging texts, students who are writing more, students who are doing more problem solving in math. Certainly challenges, but lots of opportunity. We have many excellent schools and districts in New York State, and this is an opportunity for all of us to continue to raise our expectations so that all students are prepared for college and career success. So I look forward to tonight's conversation. Certainly as we do these forums, we're gathering feedback and input. We certainly want to make adjustments along the way to ensure the success of the standards. So thank you again for the opportunity.
Commissioner, thank you very much. We would like to introduce our panelists now who have joined us here tonight for the forum. Stephen Broadwell is the superintendent of Willsboro Central School. Amy Campbell is the middle school principal at Beekmantown Central School. Catherine Brown is an English teacher at Shazy Central Rural School. And Michelle Dory is a parent of 2 children who are in elementary school. She is with us tonight as well, and we appreciate you all joining us here on the panel to take questions and also give your thoughts on the rollout of the Common Core. Stephen, that might be the best place to start. How has the rollout and the implementation gone for you at Willsboro Central School?
We actually started last year through professional development with the BOCES networking teams, and then our teachers continued that throughout the summer. So that we could implement the modules beginning in September of this year. And originally we had some skepticism, mostly because we didn't have all the documentation. We didn't have all the modules, we didn't have all that information, and as teachers and educators, we like to have that manual and that book in our hand. But as they were rolling out, our teachers were looking for it, and it was almost like Christmas presents coming when they arrived on Engage New York. So that was beneficial. Overall, for the last 2.5 months, we've had great success. We're asking our students to do things that we haven't done before or as much, and that's think. We always used to ask them for the answers, but we never really asked them to analyze, to evaluate, and just look at things in an analytical way. And that's currently happening. And our teachers are working hard. Our students are working hard. You know, I believe year 2 is going to be much better than year 1. As it continues to progress, and I've sort of developed a new motto, work hard and get smart. because you can never go wrong if you're working hard, and we continue to get smart as we're rolling things out, as we're learning. And that's where we're at Willsboro. So we have been pleased with the last 2.5 months, and we continue to look forward to this continually rolling out and getting more information.
All right, thank you very much, Stephen. Amy, from the principal's perspective, you're probably a sounding board for both teachers and parents, and what have you been hearing?
Yes, when I was preparing to come here this evening, I was saying to some people, I guess these are just the conversations I have every day, is talking to people about the Common Core, because every day there's someone in my office and we're having conversations. But speaking to what we're doing at Beekmantown Middle School, our teachers actually started a summer ago, before we had modules and things, and really delved into MET on their own time over the summer and started to put together units and things that map the Common Core standards. And then this year, as they've implemented the modules, they've started to use the modules. And that's been a little bit of a trying time for them, because they worked really hard to map the standards and to make some curriculum and unit changes the previous year. And so their struggle is with, so all this work we did a year ago that we think really worked and we really saw some success with our students, we have to throw that away now. So we're trying to find the balance between what we were already doing that was really good and aligned to the Common Core and the new modules. And the conversations change daily. From math teachers in our level, 6, 7, and 8, who are struggling because students don't have the background concepts mastered yet to be able to move into and delve into the units in the modules for math. So they've worked really hard to create some work. So that means they're a little bit behind in the modules. So we're adjusting for that. And we call this our learning year. And they're working really hard. And I just keep repeating that because they're about mid-career. And I think whether you're in education or anything, by mid-career you're thinking, okay, this is where you start to hit your stride. You start to feel like, I know what I'm doing and I know where to go from here. And the hardest part, I feel like a new teacher. Amy, I feel like a new teacher. I thought I would be past this by now. So one of it's bringing them closer together. I'll say that. In our school, we're seeing a lot of collaboration, a lot of working together. What can we do? I'm loving my grade level conversations, my science, my social studies. What can we do to help? What can we do? Vocabulary, where can we go across the curriculum with this? So it's a challenge and it's a roller coaster. I've heard great things from teachers where some of our students who struggle a little bit academically have enjoyed the fact that some of the ELA is saying ask questions. Questions are the best thing. You learn from questions. And they're saying, so students who before were really quiet in class and didn't say too much and maybe didn't want to share are now like, oh, I get to ask questions. Questions are encouraged. Then it's okay to not know these things. I want to ask those questions. But then, a couple weeks later, same teacher, we've been doing the same novel and they're really getting frustrated and they can't seem to quite get it. So we're running the whole gamut of emotions on that from our teacher perspective. My parents that are contacting me with concerns, and I host monthly meetings for my parents to attend, some of their concerns are, the children are coming home and they're stressed. And what can we do to help? Where can we find resources? And so we've encouraged them with Engage New York. But one of the things we're also working on is how do we help our parents? Because if we've always said, well, it's not the same as when you went to school, that's probably no more true than it is right now. It is not the same as when I was in school or any, my parents. So where do you go to start helping your child to do this? So those are the conversations, and that's where we're at.
All right, thank you very much. Catherine, from a teacher's perspective, is this better for students?
Well, Henry David Thoreau said the question is not what you look at, but what you see. And I see a disconnect by what we're being told is needed for college and career readiness and what we truly want for our children. So the dictionary defines ready as willing, duly equipped, completed, adjusted, or arranged for an occasion or purpose. The Department of Education defines college ready as achieving a 75% or higher on the 11th grade ELA Regents exam, achieving an 85% or higher on one math Regents exam, and beginning one's higher education not needing to take a remedial course. Though career ready is still being defined by New York State, the under construction definition is being able to problem solve after independently reading career-based manuals. So I asked local people of all ages, and I asked business leaders and academics from our region to define college and career ready. They identified ready as young people who have integrity, communication skills, decision-making skills, who accept responsibility, can problem solve, are persistent, are willing to think critically, are creative innovators, and above all else, are young people who are compassionate and self-reliant human beings. So our schools, pre-K all the way through grade 16, have been told that the tension point is the number of students graduating who are not college and career ready, and due to the urgency of this, taking a breath with the Common Core initiative will not help with the challenges our students are facing today. I truly believe in the resolute urgency of now. I believe that New York should fix or scrap the initiative. We can agree there is a tremendous need for academic diversity and curriculum equality, both in our state and across the country. We can agree that the mastery of content and learning hard skills is essential, and we understand that the appropriate application of soft skills determines who graduates from college and who keeps a career. So, as we see it, what does it mean to be ready? Ready is not knowing all the right answers. It's being able to ask the right questions. Ready is not asking for the right answers, but it's asking how to find the right answers. Ready is being able to find and solve the problem before someone tells you there is one. None of these things can be easily bubbled in or measured on a Scantron. Goethe said, every day one should at least hear one little song, read one good poem, see one fine painting, and if possible, speak a few sensible words. But with the realization of the Common Core initiative as it's being implemented in New York State, there is pressure to abandon these things under the guise of raising standards. So we need to express how important it is for our children to think in a wide variety of ways while making a stand against the over-reliance of standardized test scores.
Catherine, thank you. Michelle, as the parent of two young children, has this had an impact on them, and if so, how has it affected them?
Absolutely. As the parent of two ambitious creative elementary students, I'm upset that the abrupt rollout of the Common Core has stifled their creativity as well as their teachers' creativity. My children's school folders are peppered with ELA and math-based worksheets and tests, and I believe that is because teachers have not had the time to learn this new curriculum, let alone teach it. Furthermore, social studies, science, novels, and hands-on learning have fallen into the background of the new data and assessment-driven system. How is this preparing my children to be college and career ready, and what does that term even mean? My son took over 500 pages of tests last year in 3rd grade, just in ELA and math, and not including the state exams. He had always been an enthusiastic, straight-A student who reads way above grade level, but last year he began to dread school. Many of the tests were developmentally inappropriate and frustrating for him, but much worse for students who struggle with reading and writing. My children will not take a state exam until testing is administered fairly. In other words, when tests are used to assess what has been taught and gauge what has been learned. There's something fundamentally wrong when the teacher, student, and parent have no prior knowledge of what will be on an assessment and never see that exam after it is administered and scored. I'm discouraged that the Common Core encourages students to regurgitate information instead of thinking outside the box with a voice in their writing. The writing focus of the Common Core is data-based and stifles creativity instead of inspiring innovative writing that empowers children to love school. I know this because my son has basically written only text-based answers for the last 2 years in school. The core curriculum modules scare me. I'm disturbed that my children's teachers are being pulled out of their classrooms during valuable teaching time over and over again to learn how and what to teach when they are already competent, ambitious, intelligent, dedicated educators. My son's teacher has been in the classroom for 30 years. He spends on average 12 hours per day at school, and he knows more than anyone what his 4th graders need. He does not need a module to tell him what to teach for 10 minutes, what to move on to for 15 minutes, and what to come back to for another 10 minutes. His students tell him that. I believe modules, if used the way they seem to be intended, take the heart out of teaching and learning, a theme all too common with many of the new reforms. The Common Core as it is currently being implemented has degraded teachers, parents, and our most precious resource, our children, while companies such as Pearson and InBloom pad their pockets and sell us out. As a taxpayer, and more importantly as a mom, I'm frustrated with where public education is headed. There's always room for improvement, but I believe Common Core is standardizing our country, while more than ever countries such as China look to become less standardized and more innovative like Americans. I'm here because I want my children and all public school children to get a fair, well-rounded education so that they can be what they want to be and go where they want to go with confidence, knowledge, and the power to do so. Thank you.
Michelle, thank you. Our thanks to our panel. We are now going to take questions and comments from our audience. And you at home watching live online, here's how you can join the conversation. You can go to our webpage at mountainlake.org, our Facebook page, or through Twitter. You can use the hashtag MLJ Common Core. We'll be reading your comments throughout the evening. If you're watching this on air on Mountain Lake PBS, this has been pre-taped, but we do encourage you to join in the conversation on our Facebook page. We are going to be drawing the names of audience members at random to determine the order of speaking tonight. So we're going to begin with the first few names that we have drawn, who are going to come up to the microphone and have questions and comments for the Commissioner, the Chancellor, and for the panel. Our first speaker is Adam Schrader.
First of all, and with respect, I'd like to counter that my colleagues and I have always taught our students to think critically and to answer challenging questions. We didn't need New York State to show us how to do something we've always done. For any other assessment that a teacher would give throughout the school year, having the ability to analyze the test questions and our individual students' answers is fundamental to improving instruction and getting data to help students learn. Certainly, this hard data would be far more useful to educators than the confidential student information that school districts are being forced to upload to the online Engage New York portal, supposedly to help teachers improve instruction. We have yet to see how comparing our students' demographic information and attendance records with students in other parts of the state could help us improve instruction nearly as much as the ability to analyze our own students' performance on the tests. If the state tests have become aligned with the Common Core standards in the last 2 years of testing, why don't teachers and administrators have access to the test questions and their students' responses from the last 2 years of state tests when this information would be invaluable to improving instruction and student performance?
Thank you very much. And you didn't have a specific question? Just comment.
That is my question.
That is
Why
your
don't
question,
teachers and administrators have access to that? Okay.
So I'm going to respond to that question, but first I want to make a quick comment on the panel discussion so far and make the distinction between the Common Core, which is a set of standards about what students need to know and be able to do at each grade level, and curriculum, the materials and instructional materials that are chosen. Now the state provides a set of curriculum materials as a resource, the modules as a resource, but every district has to make the decision about the curriculum materials they use, and every teacher has to make the decision about how to adapt those materials to meet the needs of his or her students. So I just want to emphasize that point because you could hear in the panel sort of some of the variation in how people are approaching the implementation of the standards. With respect to the assessments that were given this past spring 2013, were the first state assessments to reflect the Common Core. Those assessments, for those assessments, we have provided a variety of resources for teachers and administrators to analyze the assessments and the students' performance. We provided guides to how the assessments were developed, the criteria that were used to select every item that was included in the test, the criteria that were used to select every passage that was on the assessments. Every district can get from their regional information center or their local district data center item-by-item analysis for their students of how they performed. And we released 25% of the questions annotated with which answers are correct, which answers were incorrect, why students may have chosen those incorrect answers, examples of student work at every level of performance, and all of that is available on Engage New York. The challenge for us in how many items to release, and states vary. Some states release no items. Some states release an assessment every couple of years. Some states release a percentage of items, as we are. The challenge is when we release items, it means we need to field test those items. And one of the commitments that we've made is to try to reduce testing time. And so to keep field testing time to a minimum, we can only release now 25% of the items. The board just approved at our last meeting a budget request that will help us to be able to have the resources to approach the delivery of the tests in a different way that will allow us to further reduce field testing, and we hope over time allow us to release more items.
And that's $12 million that you're going to request from the legislature?
Exactly, to help reduce testing time, help reduce field testing, and allow us in the long run to release more of the test items.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sherry. Our next speaker?
Cheryl Lucier.
Welcome. Cheryl, if you wouldn't mind stating your name, where you're from, and then if your question and comment, we'll get the mic adjusted for you.
Good evening. My name is Cheryl Lucier, and I'm here tonight as a parent of two children, an 8th grader in middle school and a 4th grader who we had to pull out of school at the end of last year to homeschool due to the fact basically that he had extreme anxiety towards school after being exposed to a very narrowed curriculum, basically math and ELA, and you know, it was at a level that was way above his developmental level, worksheets and tests all year long. So my question tonight, Commissioner King, is last year, thousands of parents, myself included, refused to let their children take the New York State tests. We know that these tests don't benefit our children in any way, considering the fact that they are made up and scored by companies who don't know our children, and that teachers aren't ever allowed to see the completed tests or the questions that their students got wrong. Not to mention the fact that by the time the scores are sent out, our children have moved on to different grades with different teachers. This year, even more parents plan to refuse the tests. My question to you is what will happen to testing when so many parents refuse the state tests that there are no longer enough students left to justify them?
So I appreciate the question, and look, no one would want students to feel unnecessary anxiety. At the same time, it's important for students to have the opportunity to do challenging work and to have the experience of persistence through challenging work, and that's the balance that educators are always trying to strike. On the issue of the assessments, teachers do get item analysis for their students based on the standards and how they did on each of the standards. That is available to teachers. As I described, 25% of the items annotated with information about the questions is provided to teachers. We look forward to being able to release more of the items. The tests are scored by teachers who look at the students' work and score the students' work. So there is value from the state assessments, but we can't ever allow the state assessments to become the curriculum. One of the reasons why many states, including New York, don't release all of the items, you don't want to narrow the curriculum to the test becoming the curriculum. And what you described about English language arts and math being the only subjects of instruction, no one would want that, certainly not the department. In fact, the Common Core emphasizes that students should be doing work in history and science, particularly in the elementary grades. The standards, the Common Core standards are not just English language arts standards, they're English language arts standards in literacy, in science, and social studies, and the technical subjects. One of the areas of emphasis in the Common Core is the idea that students need to build background knowledge in science, in social studies, in art, in music, so that students have a broad sense of the world that they can bring to bear on all of their academic studies and ultimately as citizens. So again, we heard on the panel great variety in how districts are approaching implementation. We certainly know we have work to do to support the professional development that will ensure good implementation. Thanks.
And Commissioner, we have heard that from a number of parents. Do parents or even school districts have the option to opt out?
No. So there's no opt-out because the assessments are a part of the academic program of the school. So just as you can't opt out of biology class, you can't opt out of the state assessments. That said, the reason for participation in state assessments is because they provide useful information for decision making at the classroom level, the school level, the district level, and ultimately the state level as well.
And our next questioner.
Roger Columbus.
Roger Columbus.
There's no Roger Columbus, and we'll pull the next names.
We will pull the next one.
So I'm going to read 3 at a time, and people are welcome to come up as the...
We'll do that next. We'll read the next 3 names, folks.
Valerie Butler.
Valerie Butler.
Jim Howard.
Jim Howard.
And Danielle Jackson.
And Danielle Jackson. This is like The Price is Right, trying to get you down here to the microphone. And if you wouldn't mind once again stating your name and where you're from.
My name's Valerie Butler, and I'm from Port Kent, New York. I'm the product of New York State public education and the proud mother of 3 school-aged children. And I will try to hold myself together. I'm not a special interest or a noisy soccer mom, and I resent implications to the contrary. Time and again, evidence-based research shows that even the best standardized tests are poor tools for evaluating a child's learning. Your tests, Commissioner, are not the best standardized tests. They aren't even mediocre standardized tests. They're expensive tests of the poorest quality. Rather than wasting more time sharing concerns that have been voiced to you hundreds, if not thousands of times, I pose this question to you. What does it take to get action? How many times must you and the Board of Regents listen to our concerns before finally hearing them? How many thousands of parents and school children have to refuse your low-quality, time-wasting tests before you make major corrections to the quality of the tests, the time spent administering the test, and the stakes of the tests? How many more tax dollars are we going to give to private interests while ignoring the resource we already have, which is thousands of professional educators? In summary, Commissioner, I'm tired. I'm tired of being told that you and the Board of Regents are listening to my concerns, and yet I see no effective action. You've heard us. Now what are you going to do about it? Thank you.
So I would say first, listening and agreeing aren't the same thing. And look, we are listening to the concerns that we hear, but it doesn't mean that we are in any way retreating from our conviction that the Common Core is a path to better outcomes for students in New York and across the country. So if the question is, does listening mean that we're going to stop the Common Core? No. When we believe in the Common Core, we're committed to the work on the Common Core. We believe in the assessments that we give. Can the assessments be improved over time? Of course, all assessments can be improved over time. But we believe in the quality of the assessments. The assessments are reviewed by countless teachers and educators from across the state. Every item is reviewed multiple times by educators from across the state. We have great confidence in the assessments. And frankly, the information that we have gotten from the assessments in many ways confirms information that we see on the NAEP assessment, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which is widely viewed as the gold standard for evaluating performance across states. And actually, the outcomes on the NAEP are very similar to the outcomes on the New York State exams and suggest that we have work to do as a state. And when you look at the NAEP assessment, those results were just announced a couple of weeks ago. Those were administered to a sample of students in every state. What you see in those results is that New York's performance has essentially been flat for a decade. We have the opportunity with the work on the Common Core to change that trajectory. What you also see in the NAEP is that Massachusetts, a state that raised its standards in much the way that we're doing in the mid-90s, is now the top performing state. And part of how they got there is they were resolute about raising standards. And at the time, in the mid-90s, people said the standards were too hard, the tests were too hard, but they were resolute about raising their standards. Teachers, parents, students worked together, and they met that challenge. And now, again, they're the top performing state. The other thing that the NAEP results showed is that the 2 places that made the largest gains over the last 2 years were Tennessee and the District of Columbia. 2 places that are engaged in very similar work to the work that we are now undertaking in New York. They're actually ahead of us in the work on teacher and principal evaluation, and similarly working to implement the Common Core, DC having changed their assessments to reflect the Common Core this past year. So we're very confident in the direction. That said, we are prepared to make adjustments along the way and have already begun to do that. One of the things the board did in the last 2 meetings, or some of the things the board's done in the last 2 meetings, is to try to identify places where we might eliminate unnecessary assessment. Now, the assessments we give in New York State are the ones that are federally required. But in the case of 8th grade math, the federal government has required us to give both an 8th grade math test and the algebra exam to students who are in accelerated math. We've asked the federal government to waive that. We're looking at how we might adjust assessment practices for students with disabilities. We're in the process of asking the U.S. Department of Education to allow us for some students with disabilities who have severe disabilities, severe challenges, to allow them to take assessments at their instructional level rather than their chronological age. But we'll need the U.S. Department of Education to allow that. We are talking with the U.S. Department of Education about the possibility for English language learners who are recent arrivals to the United States to be able to take native language arts assessments to gauge their literacy in their native language before they transition to English. And we also are launching a grant initiative to help districts evaluate their local assessment decisions. Because as I said, the state tests that we give have essentially been the same for 10 years, the same number of assessments. 3rd through 8th grade English language arts and math, the 5 required Regents exams. Except for the 2 history Regents exams, all of those are required by federal law. But we agree that there has been in places, not every district, an increase in testing beyond what is needed, and we want to work with districts to review their local assessment decisions and evaluate where we might reduce assessment to the minimum necessary to inform good decision making.
We are ready for our next question. Who are you, where are you from, and what's your question or comment?
Okay, thank you. My name is Jim Howard. Good evening, Commissioner and panelists. Historically, I was a 5th grade teacher. At one time, I also served as a building principal, and I currently teach at SUNY Plattsburgh as an adjunct. My question is in reference to my current position as an adjunct instructor. I teach a pre-service program for teachers. These are people who are working hard to become teachers. My current cohort consists of students in midway through their sophomore year. And while we embrace and are working hard with the Common Core, it is providing structure for what we do. My concern is I might predicate on the axiom that we learn best from our mistakes more than we do on our successes. My concern is that my students who are excited to be teachers, they're in classrooms, they're avidly practicing at a very nascent level for sure, but they are working. I believe by the time they reach their senior year and do their practice teaching, they'll be ready to teach. I know that. My concern is those first, second years, how can we afford them an opportunity to make mistakes in the classroom and learn from them if they're going to be evaluated under such stringent fashions? Thank you.
I'm going to jump in here. I want to say that the Common Core has always been about instruction and curriculum. For years, the system has had it backwards. We had testing that drove instruction and curriculum. Now, what we would like is for instruction and curriculum to drive testing. We'd like to change that paradigm. It's really important to note that in the first year of implementation of the evaluation system of teachers across the state, not surprisingly, 91% of our teachers in this state were effective or highly effective. 1% fell in to that bottom category. I want to say that if we get this up and running, and I believe we are, because I go to school districts and I sit in on classrooms and I talk to principals and superintendents, what this will do is this will drive professional development at schools and at school districts to help teachers deliver Common Core instruction. We never said this was a gotcha game with teachers. We always said this was about appropriate professional development. And the numbers after the first year of evaluation, where we had so many of our teachers just step up to the plate, I really think showed that with such high numbers, percentages of them being effective and highly effective, that the teaching core in this state is really prepared to take on this challenge.
Dr. Tisch, if I could follow, we hear from many parents and teachers that ask the question, is it possible to evaluate the teachers without tying it to the test scores? Is that something that's being explored? Is that a possibility?
You know, in New York, we have a multi-dimensional evaluation system. 20% of the teacher's evaluation is based on state testing. 80 points, that means the other 20 on local assessment and the other 60 between the principal and the teacher, 80 points are done at the district level in school buildings, in school districts. We just have 20% driven by a state test index. And so, do I think it's possible to evaluate teachers without tying it to a test? I think an accountability system that is going to be effective has to have some measure of student achievement as part of an effective system. But in New York, I think we've been very modest in that. I mean, Commissioner, what would you say?
I think that's right. The emphasis is on multiple measures. So as the Chancellor said, 60% is based on typically the principal's observation of the teacher over time. 20% is based on locally selected measures that are decided on by districts and their bargaining units. And just 20% is based on state tests. And it's important to say that state test portion is based on growth on state tests. How did students do compared to similar students over time? What progress did they make over time? It's not based on absolute performance. And in calculating that number, we take into consideration lots of factors like students' eligibility for free or reduced price lunch, students who are English language learners, students' disabilities. All of those are adjusted for to make sure that the system is fair for teachers.
I just want to share, just for Jim's sake, that we currently have 2 student teachers from SUNY Plattsburgh in our building, and the feedback I've received from their cooperating teachers is phenomenal. They're extremely excited by how prepared they are to deliver Common Core-based lessons and to address those college and career readiness skills. And we have, I think it's 5 first level where they just come in for 4 weeks and are in the classroom. And those teachers as well are getting a great experience and are seeing the Common Core in action, but they've also come in prepared to help, especially with the collaborative grouping that needs to be done in those classrooms. So just shout out to SUNY that we're pleased with the people that we're receiving from your program.
All right, thank you. Our next question. Welcome.
Well, thank you. My name is Danielle Jackson, and I'm a 4th grade teacher at Oak Street Elementary. But more important, I'm a parent of 3 young children, and I'll try to hold this together. I sit at the dinner table every night with all 3 children, and they ask me, why, Mommy, why, Mommy? And I always say to them, well, maybe someday you'll get the opportunity to ask the commissioner. Well, we have been fortunate enough that tonight my daughter, Kaylee Jackson, is able to ask you her question, and you can hear from somebody that is facing this every single day. So I now turn it over to Kaylee. Just give me 1 sec, okay?
Just talk right into that, okay? Good evening, Commissioner King. I would like to let you know a bit about me before I begin. I am a 5th grader at Peru Elementary School. I love dogs and dream of becoming a veterinarian. I love to learn and discover new things. I perform research, written books, and devoured novels all on my own time. I am a learner. So, I would like to begin by telling you that I beat your tests. But other kids and some of my friends weren't so lucky. Those kids now feel like they are not as smart as they are supposed to be according to you. Now let me describe my morning in 5th grade. First, we have ELA, and we read many articles and stories about things that I would never choose to read on my own, and I have no interest in. Then we answer questions about them. I have no idea what they are asking me. After that, I go into math, and the problems are so long and complicated that I have no desire to solve them the way we are being asked to, because my way works. I have a very hardworking teacher, Miss LaFountain. I am not blaming any of this on her. I watch my mom, who teaches 4th grade, and know how hard teachers work into the night and on vacations. She is just following your laws. All the teachers try their best to teach their students and help them to learn. My brother is in 1st grade, and he does great while school is in session, but when he gets home, he unravels because of the long and boring school day that forces a 6-year-old boy to work on subjects and no time left to learn how to play. My other brother, who is in kindergarten, talks at our dinner table about how many tests he takes. It is pretty bad when he takes more pen and paper tests than he can even pronounce. We spend a lot of time learning how to take tests, practicing tests, and leaving and you are leaving us no time to have fun and enjoy being a child in school. I have the rest of my life to work this hard all day long. Maybe this is why people in our world are becoming more violent at a young age. They aren't allowed to be kids. I can't imagine how the kids feel that aren't as lucky as I am. I mean the kids that don't have parents that feed them properly and never mind have the time to do homework with them. I must mention my mom is a teacher and she has to do research sometimes to help me with my homework. As a leader of our education system, I think you do want a happy and successful group of New Yorkers. But please do what you ask teachers to do. Change what you are doing if it is not working. I am telling you this is not working. Stop testing, stop judging teachers on how the kids do on tests, and stop this cruelty. Please give the children of New York the same opportunity you give your own children, to be what they want to be and enjoy their days in school. Now for my question. Do you get the gist of my speech, and do you have the zest to admit a mistake and change what needs to be changed? I am your data.
Thank you for your question. Commissioner.
So first, Kaylee, thank you for your question, and you read that very well, and I appreciate your thoughtfulness about your experience in school. And I have a fifth grader at home as well. She sometimes has similar questions. One day I came home and my fifth grader said to me, my math homework is taking me a really long time and it's your fault. And I asked why was that, and she said it was taking her a long time to write an explanation of how she solved the problem. So similar to your concern about math, right? That now we ask a lot of explanation of how a problem was solved. And so what I told her and what I would tell you is that what we're trying to accomplish with the Common Core is to make sure that students really learn math, that they have the opportunity to see that you can get to different answers in math using different strategies, and they have the opportunity to explain how they solved it so their teacher can see their reasoning, the way they thought about the problem, and if they got it wrong, help them get it right the next time and help them improve their math skills. No one wants, and certainly the Board of Regents doesn't want, I don't want for school not to be a place of joy. It doesn't mean all learning is fun. Sometimes learning is just hard. Right? Sometimes, whether you're learning an instrument or learning a sport or learning math or learning history or science, sometimes it is going to be hard. It's not always going to be fun, but learning should be joyful, and school should be joyful. So I worry a lot about the things that you described. No one wants for testing to take away time from teaching and learning. Now, we have tests that we give at this as a state. Those happen once a year in the spring. You know, you took it. The rest of the tests are decided on by the school, sometimes by individual teacher, sometimes by the district. And our job is to help teachers and districts make good decisions about how much time they spend on those tests so they can see how students are learning and how much time they spend on teaching. A lot of what you described worries me. I don't want schools to lose the joy even as we try to make sure that students learn as much as possible. And we've got to figure out ways to make sure that schools are helping students who are struggling and helping them to learn the math, learn the reading. And you said sometimes the things you read aren't things that you're interested in. That's okay. Sometimes you're going to read things that are really interesting and really exciting and really engaging and exactly what you would want to pick. And sometimes you have to read things that are going to be helpful to you even if you're not that excited about reading them. And we've got to do a better job as a state at helping your teachers support all the kids in your class so that they can do well with the things that they're reading. So I appreciate your question. Certainly the Chancellor and I will think a lot about what you said, so I thank you for sharing that.
I think she's going to be a veterinarian by the time she's 18.
Commissioner, let me ask you if I could at this point. We know you and the Chancellor are firmly behind the Common Core standards. We are hearing from many parents, though, that ask the question, should there at least maybe be a timeout, a delay, allow students and teachers time to adjust. Is that a possibility that the state could be considering?
Well, it's important to remember that we, the board, adopted the standards in 2010. So we're only partially through what is a phase-in of the Common Core. Last year, students in 3rd through 8th grade took the assessments that reflected the Common Core. This year, for the first time, typically 9th graders take the algebra exam. They'll take an algebra exam that reflects the Common Core, although they have the choice to take the exam based on the old standards and use the higher score. The following year, students will, for the first time, take the geometry exam that will reflect the Common Core when they're in 10th grade. And so the first students who are required to pass Common Core Regents exams will graduate in 2017. So that's a 7-year process. People are teaching Common Core algebra today in 9th grade classrooms, so those assessments will reflect the Common Core at the end of this year. So it is a very step-by-step phase-in. That said, what's clear as we listen at these forums is there are places where we can adjust around assessments, adjust around professional development, and there are challenges. I mean, I think everyone on the panel described the challenges, that the work of the change process is hard, but we're going to keep identifying ways to provide additional support. One of the things we'll do is to work, we hope, with the governor and legislature to try to direct more resources to professional development. As a state, we've invested a lot over the last 3 years in professional development, but there's always a need for more. And we want to be able to ensure that districts have the resources they need to provide good professional development.
Thank you. Let's find out what people are saying online now. Our interactive producer, Josh Clement, is here, also our Director of Communications, Jen Kowalczyk, and they have been monitoring what people are saying online through social media as well tonight. So, Josh, what are we hearing?
Yes, Tom, this question's for the forum. It comes in our website, mountainlake.org. It's from Brian, and Brian says, testing has little value if teachers are not able to use the information to improve instruction and to gear lessons to the needs of individual students. How will you ensure that data collected will be accessible to teachers and administrators?
So again, I want to emphasize that for the state tests, the regional information centers or the data centers in districts can provide information on how students did on every standard that was assessed on the test. We provide 25% of the questions, analysis of what the correct answers were, what the incorrect answers were. We also provide examples of student work at every level of performance. So there is a lot of information from the assessments to inform instruction. And as I mentioned, we have this budget request that we hope will allow us to reduce field testing and over time release more items. But again, we don't want the state test to be the curriculum. The work on the Common Core is about the standards, and the standards should define the curriculum.
Our next question or comment?
Yes, we also took this opportunity to put a poll on our website, and it's something we haven't touched on yet. The question we asked was, did New York State rush to implement the Common Core standards? And at this point, we've had quite a few responses. It's 88% yes, 13% no. So it's kind of something we haven't touched on, and I know it's sort of looking backwards, but are there any thoughts about that? We've had quite a few comments in regards to that.
Look, the challenge for New York and for every state that's doing the work on the Common Core is you want to make sure that students are as prepared as possible. And students are in 3rd grade this year, they're in 7th grade this year, they're in 11th grade this year. And you want to make sure they have access to the richest possible curriculum this year and the richest possible standards this year. You've got to balance that with the pace of implementation. Last year in New York, in our community colleges around the state, and this is true in this region as well, we had a majority of students in our community colleges required to take remedial classes, required to take high school classes for which they and their families paid college prices. For every additional remedial class you're required to take, the less likely you are to graduate from college. Many of our community colleges in the state have a 6-year graduation rate in the 20s. And so we know that for students, they're accountable for the reading skills, the math skills that are required by the Common Core today when they get to college or when they get to the workplace. I talk to employers all across the state, as does Chancellor Tisch or Regent Dawson. And what we hear from employers, similar to what we hear from college faculty, too many students who are not prepared. Now again, we have great districts and schools that are doing a great job, but we unfortunately have work to do as a state to make sure all students are prepared. And so there's a tremendous urgency to ensure that students are prepared. Every year we don't have students prepared with the Common Core is another year of students who are underprepared for college and the workforce. So we chose a 7-year timeline for phase-in that was trying to balance the urgency for students with the pace of implementation. There are some who argue, well, you should start with kindergartners and you should have a 13-year phase-in, but that's 13 more years of students who are not prepared with the skills that the Common Core requires. That's the challenge. That's the balance that all states that are doing the Common Core work are trying to strike.
I agree that we don't have time to wait, but we also have to get it right in the time that we're doing it. And though you have said it is a 7-year phase-in, our current 9th graders will only be able to take the Common Core Regents exams in order to get a high school diploma. And yet in 9th grade English, for example, there is only one of the modules available. I believe the second one came out either yesterday or today. And so our 9th grade teachers who have to get those students ready to take that test for 11th grade and then in 10th grade and 11th grade, we don't even know what the whole entire year looks like now that are going to have to take that test, and they have no safety net. And so part of the concern of teachers is we don't have all of the information in terms of what we have the standards, but we don't yet have a scope and sequence, so to speak, to use old educational terms, of what does that mean. And part of the problem is that the standards that are tested and the standards that are expected aren't the same. Only some of the standards are tested. And I understand you have to pick and choose those things, but we don't even yet know for the students who are taking the test what they have to know in order to be able to take the assessment. And though I appreciate New York State thinking double testing we have to eliminate, but this year's 8th grade, if we are lucky enough that they don't take the math test and the 9th grade Regents, will still take the Common Core Regents. So they are still going to take an extra test this year. And so there's a concern with that. And just to comment from a teacher perspective of what you said was available to us to help inform our instruction, we do get a list of how many students met what standards. But the standards that are on that data that we have achieved are so general and vague, it doesn't help inform my instruction. It tells me that my students had difficulty with author's craft, for example. But author's craft is a gigantic topic in ELA. Was it diction? Was it mood? Was it figurative language? And so we need more specifics with that data that we are being provided. Whether or not that's all of the questions or not, we still have to have an understanding. If my students got the mood question wrong, did they get the mood question wrong because they didn't understand the passage and therefore didn't understand the mood? Or were the vocabulary terms that were given as options for what the mood was it that? And those are two very different teaching skills and helping students do that. And so I believe as a teacher that we need different resources than we currently have to not only teach what we're expected to teach and therefore assess, but also how to inform that instruction. And I do believe that stopping may not be the best choice, but I do think pausing and fixing it to get it right, as Kaylee said, is a better option for us. That doesn't mean just completely stop and do nothing, but I do believe that we need to do the time frame a little bit different.
And let's continue with our next question. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Tim Butler, and I'm a 5th grade teacher and a parent of 3 school-age children. I'd like to start with saying that I'm a fan of the Common Core standards. The children in my classroom this year are doing amazing things, and I'm so proud of the progress that they've made. My problem isn't with the Common Core standards. My problem is with the test. I'd like to make a couple points about the test. First, we need to get rid of field test questions. Not a few, they all need to go. Some of you may not know what field test questions are and who benefits from them. There are passages and questions on the test that do not count for or against our kids. Pearson gets to try out these passages and questions on New York State students and gets to reuse these questions on state tests all over the United States. For instance, they will put the same passage and questions on the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade tests to see which grade level they will use them on in future tests. I don't even know if I'm supposed to know that, but I do. Our kids spend their very limited time during the test reading passages and answering questions that do not even count. And this prevents them from answering the questions solely for the benefit of Pearson. The other thing I want to talk about today is close reading. It is a great reading strategy to help students break down difficult texts and to understand them. The problem is in the test, Commissioner, if the students take the time to do the close reading strategies that we teach them, they do not finish the test. Last year, I had over 1/3 of my students not finish the state exam. Now, these weren't kids that were fooling around or putting their heads down their desks. They were taking copious notes, and they just didn't have time to finish. I don't see how that is a fair judge of what they know and what they do not know. In closing, I guess I'd like to say, between the extra questions that benefit only Pearson, and with too many passages and questions already on the test, coupled with the fact that children do not have the time to use wonderful strategies such as close reading, it seems as if you do not want children to be successful. If you did, you would eliminate field test questions completely, and you would cut the number of passages on the test in half. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. So on field testing, all large-scale assessments include field testing of items. Actually, you have to field test items for them to appear on a large-scale assessment by the standards of assessment design. What's unique about New York is we are the only state that I know of that prints our own tests. We print only 4 forms of the test, which means that compared to other states that print typically 20 forms, 25 forms, we can field test only a very small number of items as embedded field test items. The other items have to be field tested separately in what we call standalone field tests that students take just for the purpose of field testing. The benefit isn't to Pearson. To be clear, the items belong to the state of New York, and field testing of New York State items, again, is a required part of test development. Now, the Board of Regents just put forward budget requests that will allow us to, instead of printing just 4 forms, to be able to print more like 20 or 25 forms like other states, which will allow us to field test a much smaller number of questions on each of those forms and allow us to get rid of the standalone field testing. So we take seriously the concern you've raised, but I do want to be clear, field testing is a standard part of the development of all large-scale assessments, SATs, APs. You have to field test the items, you have to try them out with students. And you want to have as few field test items as you can, and we're trying to do that with this budget request that we've made.
Could you also address the length of the test? Because that is a very significant piece. The one thing we don't want is for students not to complete. We want them to show this. We're not playing gotcha with kids. We're not playing gotcha with teachers. So the length of the test, John.
There's a couple things you're trying to balance with the length of the test. In New York, we have an estimated time that it will take students, and then we allow up to an additional portion of work time in case students need more time. We made that change 2 years ago based on feedback from the field of wanting to make sure that students had time to finish. There are some states that do untimed tests. Massachusetts, for example, they have no time limit on their tests. But there's a trade-off because we all know kids, we've all worked with kids who, if there was no time limit, would work all day, right? So there's a trade-off. We decided to set an estimated time and then an additional period of 20 minutes, 30 minutes in case students needed more time to work. This year, we've tried to reduce the number of items. As we move towards the spring 2014 test, the math test will actually be 20 minutes shorter. We are reducing the number of items on the math test to achieve that. And then on the English test, we actually are making the estimated time on the test shorter. That is reducing the number of items, but keeping the same length of time so that students have more time to finish. Now, we did an analysis of last year's test, and it was not an unusual number of students who struggled to finish, but nonetheless, anecdotally, we heard this concern about wanting to make sure that students had time to do close reading, time to thoughtfully review their writing, and so we are making that adjustment. And every year with the assessments, we try to look back, learn from what we heard from the field on the assessments, what we see in the student performance, and try to make adjustments. And so those are adjustments that we're making for the 2014 assessments.
I just wanted to share a frustration I have with field testing, and it's just because it's recent, just to throw it out there. And I don't know that there is another option, but the field testing, we received an invitation to participate in park field testing, and it's 2 weeks prior to our state testing. I'm asking no because I said to myself, I want my students to do the best that they can on the state test, and 3 sessions, 4 sessions just prior to that, it's just, they're not they're middle school students.
And if they weren't in close proximity, would you have wanted to be a district?
Absolutely. In fact, because that was the struggle, is like, do I want to see what the park is going to, do I want to see how that's going to work in our building with all, a number of students trying to test on computers? I would have wanted to participate in that, but it's just, I would prefer to have it this time of year rather than that, because I can see the value in that. I mean, I wouldn't want to do it every year, but to be a field testing school once in a cycle would be appreciated, but we definitely can't do it that close to the test.
And back to the length of the test, what would you say to parents who heard that news this week and immediately were concerned about that could stress their students out even more, that they're now going to have less time to take at least a few of those tests?
Well, again, we reduced the number of items, so there are fewer tasks for them to do. It's a shorter test, and that's why we're also reducing the amount of time. But there'll still be a cushion, a period of time beyond what the estimated time is for students to be able to finish their work. Just quickly on PARC. PARC, and not everyone may know this, is a consortium of states that are working together to build a Common Core assessment that will be delivered online. We'll be field testing this year. We'll also be field testing next year.
On a voluntary basis.
On a voluntary basis. Districts will get to choose to participate. One of the challenges when you've got 15, 20 states working together is that everybody has different calendars. And so the field test window was set by the states collaboratively. It's not ideal for New York, that's for sure. That may change next year. We hope that it will, because we'd like districts to be able, if they want, to field test, to try out delivering the online assessment.
And our next question. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Jamie Hall. I am a 5th grade teacher in the Beekmantown Central School District. Yeah, that must be the crux of the problem. I work in the Cumberland Head building, and I'm also a parent of 2 children, one now in college and the other finishing high school. I agree with Tim Butler. I'm not dissatisfied with the Common Core, although I do think some of the requirements of the Common Core really are not developmentally appropriate. But my question is about some of the modules linked to Common Core. Our district had to develop a LAP, and we are now being told that we have only 2 choices to guide our curriculum. So I'd like to know the reasoning behind the use of core texts in a given grade level that are above that grade level. For example, in 5th grade, the first reading module, which we would start in September, uses the core text of Esperanza Rising, and this book has a level and an alphabetical scale, a level V on the Fontes and Pinnell leveling system. But students entering 5th grade are only expected to be coming in on grade level at a level S. So what's the reasoning for giving to the entire class a level 4 alphabetical letters above grade level?
Well, a lot depends on where the students are. So one of the reasons why the modules are a optional supplementary resource is that every district has to decide based on their students what makes sense for their students. Now, I've been in a lot of classrooms teaching Esperanza Rising and been a part of a number of great conversations with students about that text. I can think of a conversation I was in Western New York last year with a group of 5th graders who were reading Esperanza Rising, where they were looking for evidence of the themes in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in Esperanza Rising. One of the students, I asked the students, how is reading this book and working on this module different from reading instruction last year? And one of the students said, well, last year we would just read a book and we'd write a book report at the end, but this year we have to use evidence to explain our analysis of the book, which was perfect. And the second kid said, yeah, and in order to do that, you have to read it really carefully, you have to read it really closely. And then the third student said, yeah, and the books are better that way, right? Which is exactly right? We want to savor the words that the author chose, the language that the author chose. It's part of the beauty of reading. The challenge is at the state level, we don't know what level the students are at that are coming into your classroom, right? And so you've got to make a decision as a teacher. Do you need bridge materials? Do you start with the first module, the first week, or do you need other materials before you start that? We're starting to build scaffolding materials to support the modules for students who may be below grade level or behind, or students who are advanced. The other thing I would say about text complexity and text challenge is that it is valuable for students to engage with texts that are above their reading level, right? You need a mix. You want to make sure that they're reading texts that are right in that zone of proximal development, right? That are going to challenge them a little bit, but you also want them to read texts that are, in a sense, aspirational. For me, in my elementary school experience, doing Shakespeare in elementary school was an incredibly powerful and important learning experience, right? Engaging with really challenging texts, but in a way where we learned the vocabulary and we performed it and we had an opportunity to delve really deeply into it. So you want that mix, but you know your students best, you know your classroom best, and the modules are not supposed to be a script or something that has to be done every day in a particular way. They're a resource for teachers to adapt.
I would also like to remind everyone that when the 45 states adopted Common Core, one state, understanding that there was going to be a huge need for curricular materials, went out to produce these modules, and that's New York State. The other states that adopted that did not provide any opportunity for districts to have a state-supplied curriculum around Common Core. And I think it's really important for everyone to understand that. And I think that districts that I visit and that I see, some use the modules like exacting. Many of them use the modules to inform and supplement what they're doing. And I would just urge everyone to remember that the modules are there to enhance instruction, not to dictate instruction.
Thank you for your question. Our next speaker.
Hello, my name is Rob Lebo. I am actually, I'm from Malone, New York, and I'm a pre-service student teacher. So I'm actually trying to claw my way through the teaching process. Thanks, Pearson. My question, because I'm interning with second grade, so I really am, and like most of us, we are speaking for the students and the children because they are the ones that matter. So my questions are very student-oriented. First, what does college and career readiness actually mean? And how does Common Core get us there? My second question is, how exactly does it help our at-risk students and our impoverished students? And third, if you want to create lifelong learners, you need to stop creating an environment where they hate school, because it's only going to get worse. It really is.
Actually, why don't you stay right there in case we need any of the questions repeated? So, thank you, Commissioner.
So let me start with the ways in which the Common Core is beneficial to those students who face the greatest challenges. One of the areas of emphasis in the Common Core, and you said you're doing second grade, right? One of the areas of emphasis in the Common Core in the early grades is the development of students' academic language, building their vocabulary, and building their background knowledge. And that's based on decades of research about the gaps that our most at-risk students face. There's a famous study, the Hart and Risley study, of word knowledge. And what that study showed is that more affluent students were arriving at school having heard 30 million more words than their less affluent peers. And so there's this huge language gap. So one of the things that's emphasized in the core knowledge materials, the materials that we've adopted for K through 2, because it reflects the Common Core, is this idea of building students' academic language, their bank of vocabulary words. Another area of focus in the Common Core is that history and science and building background knowledge in a range of areas is critical to students' long-term success as readers. Right? You need to not just be able to decode the words, but you need to be able to know what the author's talking about. And the more exposure you have to background knowledge, the more likely you will be to be able to access the text. And so the core knowledge materials that we chose for K through 2 or P through 2 emphasize building background knowledge, as you've probably seen, through read-alouds and through other opportunities to build background knowledge. Now, core knowledge has decades of research behind it, including very extensive field tests that they did of many of the materials that are part of the core knowledge curriculum. But core knowledge curriculum isn't required, and people could make other choices, but the standards emphasize that building of background knowledge and the building of academic language, both of which are critical, particularly for our most at-risk students. You asked about the creating a joyful learning environment. Chancellor and I were in Mineola, Long Island last week with kids and teachers who are having a fantastic time with the work that they're doing on the Common Core. We were in English language arts classrooms where students were telling us about how much they love the text, including, I remember where the person is, including Esperanza Rising, which one of the kids told us was his favorite book. We were in a math class where kids were loving the problem solving in the math curriculum. Their teacher had actually set up this thing where she would send home the homework, where she would also do a little video clip where she would explain the first math problem in the homework to help students access the homework and their parents. And they were sending that home. Parents loved it. Kids loved it because they could hear the teacher's explanation of the first problem before they tackled the homework. And kids liked it so much that they started wanting to turn in their own math homework that way. So they were doing little videos of them explaining how they solved their math problems, and some of the kids showed us that. So I don't think joyful learning and higher standards are in tension. They can go together and support each other. And there was a third part of your question.
My third question was about college and career readiness. What does that actually mean? And how is the Common Core getting our students there?
Yeah. Well, so, and we talked about this on the panel as well. College and career readiness isn't just academic skills. We think about college and career readiness having multiple domains. One domain is definitely academic knowledge. If you don't have the reading skills, writing skills, math skills to be able to take credit-bearing college coursework, or to do the kinds of reading that would be required in an entry-level career that would pay a good job, you're in trouble. So clearly academic knowledge, not just in ELA and math, but in science, social studies, is a critical part of college and career readiness. But we mustn't define college and career readiness just by those things. Right? It's important to know if the student has that academic knowledge. But we also have to think about college and career readiness in terms of the behaviors and what sometimes people refer to as non-cognitive skills, but things like perseverance and grit and the ability to problem solve, the ability to work effectively in teams, a variety of skills that go to students' readiness for higher education and the world of work. And then I would argue there's a third domain which all students need, because all students will have careers, whether they go directly to that career or get a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree, of career knowledge and awareness and skills. Now, you might build that in a career and tech ed program at a high school or at a community college level, but knowledge of careers is more than that. You know, particularly when you think about high needs students, they may not know the breadth of careers that are available. You know, if you ask students who haven't been exposed, let's say, to healthcare, you say, well, who works in a hospital? Kids will tell you doctors and nurses. But actually, there are a lot more jobs than that in a hospital, right? There are pharmacists, there are x-ray technicians. There are lots of interesting things you can do in a hospital. And so part of what we have to do through our technology course at the middle school level, through the opportunity students get in high school, is expose them to that range of what's possible for them beyond high school, that career awareness. And all of that is still only a part of what we want for students. We also want them to learn an appreciation of art and music. We want them to be prepared to be good citizens. So college and career readiness is very broad, but we know certainly academic skills are a necessary but not sufficient condition for college and career readiness. Thanks.
Thank you for your questions.
Can I just add two? Sure. For second graders, I had an opportunity to go in and listen to our second graders, and they just finished the Fables and Folktale unit, and they had a luncheon that particular day, and the kids were dressed up, and when I went in, they were able to tell me and explain the differences and the stories they had read and the characters that were in part of the unit, and it was phenomenal. And then a few weeks later, they were studying about China, and we had an opportunity to actually Skype with someone that did a study abroad in China in our conference room, and the students had thought out questions ahead of time and were able to ask this particular person the questions that they wanted to know specific to what they had learned. And they were both tremendous learning opportunities for our students in second grade based on the curriculum.
That's fantastic. Thanks.
Thank you. We've had the panel up under the lights, the hot lights, for about 80 minutes. So I think, Jen, what we're going to ask is that you maybe choose 1 or 2 more questions. Yep. Then we'll read a couple of comments from online, and then we'll wrap up with the last couple of questions for the evening for the panel.
1 last or 2?
You folks up for 2 more questions? Is that? Yeah. Let's do 2 more. And
Aaron McGill and Charlie Thomas.
Aaron McGill? Nope. And?
No, Charlie Thomas.
Okay, Charlie Thomas, and maybe one more after Charlie.
Derek Hopkins.
That's me, but I don't have
You're
any
good?
problems.
Okay.
I'm good.
Okay. Try
One more. And we'll get with you in just a moment. And Josh, if you're ready, we'll come to you in just a
Jennifer
second.
Christensen.
Okay, good. Yes, we're going to go to Josh now and get a couple of comments, and then we'll go to the last two questions. So at this point, let's go to Josh Clement and hear a little more some of the comments we're hearing online.
Yeah, Tom, we're hearing from a number of parents that are echoing the comments here about the length and subject matter of the tests, and a question from an online viewer as well. They say, you got to take the high stakes out of this assessment. Good, solid, in-class formative assessment can inform the teacher. Common Core assessments should inform curriculum improvement and not teacher improvement. How are you going to take the pressure off administrators and teachers?
Well, it's really important to say we don't evaluate teachers based on test scores alone. As the Chancellor described, the growth on state assessments is 20% of the evaluation. And last year, the first year of Common Core assessments, 91% of teachers in the state were rated effective or highly effective. So yes, we're looking at whether or not students grew, how they perform relative to other students on the state test as part of the evaluation system, but that's not defining the evaluation system. Our position has always been that the growth on state tests should be one among multiple measures for teacher evaluation, for principal evaluation, and for making decisions about students, whether you're making a promotion decision or a course placement decision. Yes, you should look at the students' assessment results, but you should look at other things like their grades and their participation in class, their recommendations of faculty members, et cetera.
And we're ready for our next question from the audience. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Charlie Thomas, and I am the principal of the St. Regis Mohawk School, an elementary school located on the St. Regis Mohawk Reservation of Akwesasne. Our district adopted both the ELA and the math modules. The quality of the ELA and the math modules are shockingly poor, with spelling, grammatical, and conceptual errors. In addition to these errors, the modules are culturally insensitive, with Native Americans depicted in stereotypical ways. As an educator and a parent, I am extremely disappointed that this curriculum is being distributed by the New York State Education Department. What are the plans for overhauling the modules to be developmentally appropriate for students, and the justification of tying these underdeveloped modules to high-stake testing, which are directly tied to teacher and administrator performance?
So just I have to say on the modules, we consistently get very positive feedback about the modules, even some of the comments described tonight. And when I visit schools and see the modules in action, I'm consistently impressed by the work that students are doing. That said, we've always said that we will continue to refine the materials. Have there been typos? Sure. And when people email us about those typos, we correct them. One of the benefits of having all of the materials posted online is that we can make very quick corrections. That said, we're going to continue to refine and revise the modules. Many districts are sharing through their BOCES or through other strategies materials that they've developed as scaffolding or supports around the materials. When folks have concerns about themes that are in the modules, we hear those out. We've made some adjustments in places. We continue to get feedback on the sequence of learning. Even we have network team institutes throughout the year where professional development leaders and teachers and principals from around the state gather. We just had 1,000 folks in Albany last week for several days of training. The authors of the modules were there gathering feedback. The authors of the modules include many New York State educators who are working with the materials in their own classrooms. And so sure, we'll continue to refine them. They are an optional supplementary resource. Any curriculum, whether it's one that is the materials developed by the state or materials that are developed locally or materials that are purchased, will need refinement and adaptation to meet the needs of students. Certainly the materials we're producing are no exception.
And with all due respect, I would have to say that my child's in 2nd grade, and she brings home homework every night, math homework, that I do sit down and I work with her. And there is at least an error in at least 2 to 3 of them per week. That's really unacceptable. I mean, as educators, and we're sitting here talking about Common Core standards and about being college and career ready, and the the curriculum that we're being given by New York State is not even up to that standard. And as an educator and as a parent, I just don't find that acceptable. And
So I disagree with your characterization, but I am certainly happy to follow up and see what you would identify as things that you would change about the modules. Again, we get very consistent positive feedback on the modules. I've seen them in classrooms in use myself and seen the learning gains that students are making. But if there are specific issues that you've seen that you would like us to address, I'm happy to have you send those to us, and we will review them.
My second question was about the standardized testing. You know, with these modules underdeveloped, they're still directly linked to teacher and administrator evaluation. Although it is multiple measures, 40% of it is from an assessment, 20% from the state or an SLO, and 20% from a local, which is an assessment. So we are being evaluated 40%, 40 points on assessments.
Well, again, as the Chancellor explained, the 20% that is local is something that's determined at the local level by districts and their bargaining units deciding together what assessments they want to use. To be clear, the state assessments are not tied to the modules. The modules are a curriculum resource. The assessments are designed not based on the modules, but based on the standards. So districts have to choose whether or not to use the modules, whether they think that they're a useful resource, whether they want to adapt them. But the modules don't define the assessments. The assessments reflect the standards. Curriculum decisions, professional development decisions are and have always been local decisions.
And I would say that as an administrator, I have attended several trainings from the state and from our local BOCES, and the information that we're receiving is it's not consistent, because we were actually told that the modules, if we were to implement the modules, they would directly affect the New York State exams and help our students be more successful. Now I'm hearing that it's just a supplement. So I guess the information that we're receiving isn't quite as clear as it should be.
Again, the modules are a resource. The Common Core is a set of standards. The assessments reflect the standards. So yes, the curriculum materials were developed based on the standards. And we believe in the materials. If you go on our Engage New York, there's a blog, Engage Voices, where people describe the successes they're having with the modules. There's a series of videos, classrooms from around the state, of teachers using the modules to great success with their students. That said, the curriculum materials that we're providing are just one option. The assessments are based on the standards, and districts can choose whatever curriculum they believe will help their students prepare to meet the standards.
Thank you. And our next questioner. Welcome.
Hi, I'm here to ask the Commissioner and the Chancellor about poverty. Here in Clinton County, we have many families who do not have access to computers in the home. So, Commissioner, you're painting a very beautiful picture of what some classrooms look like, where children can probably enjoy school because they have parents who can support them at home. Well, I've been a special educator for 27 years in this county, and believe me, it is not all as pretty as you portray. There are students who go home at night who do not want to do homework because their homes are not places where they can think and be creative and have resources to do these projects. They can't flip a class because they don't have a computer in the home. They must use school time. And here's the rub. Right now, the Common Core is fully soaring through New York State at a time when our schools have very limited funds. We have 32 students in integrated classes with multiple students with disabilities and reading problems. We have elementary classes that are very, very diverse. And we don't have the resources to meet these standards. And I also want to reiterate, with the 20% being standardized testing and our APPR scores, SLOs do count for 20%. And for people who are not aware of this, SLOs are testing that are given interim-wise throughout the year, adding to the students' testing load. And these are taken very seriously and take up a lot of teacher and student time. So I would really like to say, how does the Common Core, in your estimation, close the equity gap in rural places like Clinton and Essex County?
Let me make one point on SLOs. So SLOs don't have to involve new assessments. Districts decide what the student learning objectives will be. The student learning objectives essentially ask, what's the goal for this course and how will we know if students are achieving it? In many courses, there were existing assessments that were used to determine student grades historically, and so a school district could use existing assessments for the student learning objectives. It's not required that any new tests be administered in order to develop student learning objectives, just to be clear.
Some districts chose not to do SLOs. They did. John, why don't you explain
right.
that? But it's really an important piece. If you go to districts across this state, there are districts who did not do SLOs. Through collective bargaining, they chose a different path. And in those districts, there are far less testing. But you know, we've spoken about testing, but I think it's really important to engage in the issue of poverty. The idea behind Common Core and the idea behind standards is to create the opportunity for opportunity. It is to create the opportunity for choice at the end of high school. Are you prepared, and do you want to go on to college? Or do you want to have a career? Right now, in highly challenged school districts across this state, children, young adults, do not have a choice because the standards that they are being exposed to simply do not prepare them for that choice. By addressing the issue of a standard and by calling the question, what we are trying to do is enable every school district to make sure that every youngster in every classroom in this state has a choice. Commissioner?
And let me just say, I don't believe you have to choose whether to tackle issues of poverty or tackle issues of instruction. We've got to do both as a state and as a country. The Regents have a long history of advocating for greater equity in school finance. Regent Dawson in particular has a long history of advocating for equity in school finance, particularly to address issues of rural poverty. We'll continue to advocate for that with the governor and the legislature. We want the right resources in schools. We also need to do more than just address schools when we're trying to tackle poverty. We're going to argue for a greater investment in early childhood education, which we think can make a huge difference for our highest need students. We also are working on a community schools initiative that will support wraparound services for students.
Early childhood. Access to early childhood, pre-K, is an essential element to assuring opportunity. And the fact that in the year 2013, New York State is still debating pre-K, half-day pre-K or full-day pre-K, when we know, when everyone knows that pre-K really is just a necessity if you want to get these kids up and running on the right track. I'm a first grade teacher, and I had students come to me at all different levels. And there was always a difference between youngsters who had quality early childhood, and those who came to kindergarten and first grade without it.
Thank you. When we talk about resources, will you approach the governor and the legislature to look for additional resources to help implement the Common Core, whether it's teacher development, whether it's assessment tests, the cost, the huge cost for the school districts? Will you approach both the governor and the legislature to look for additional resources?
Absolutely. One of our commitments is to try to ensure that we have the right level of resources, particularly that we direct those resources to the highest needs communities, whether those are districts serving students in poverty in rural areas or our urban areas or small cities. So we're going to advocate for more resources for education generally and for more resources, particularly focused on professional development around the Common Core, early childhood education, the things that we believe will be critical to students meeting our college and career-ready aspirations.
Might you consider allocating that $12 million that you mentioned earlier for data warehousing, maybe taking a little bit of that and putting it on the front lines?
That illustrates the challenge, right? So we debated, right, whether or not reducing field testing was the best use of $12 million. But we've heard very consistently the desire to see us eliminate standalone field testing. And so that is an investment that we think is worth making. Last year, the governor and legislature put in roughly $1 billion in additional funding to education. And we are going to go into this year's budget process with that kind of investment in mind.
Thank you. Commissioner, thank you. Folks, we're going to wrap it up now. Our thanks to our audience, to our panel, and to the Plattsburgh chapter of the League of Women Voters who have helped us with the timing here tonight, and to both the Commissioner and the Chancellor. Thank you for both appearing here with us tonight. Also, our thanks to you for watching. For Alice Recor and all of us here at Mountain Lake PBS, I'm Tom Hellick. Thank you and good night.